Hello, everyone. This is your Bible Big Brother Christian. Welcome back to day number 7 in our Bible in the Year, Bible in the Year um, deal that we're doing, our ESV Study Bible in a Year project that we have going on here. Um, we have had some great time so far. Did a couple of prep days, uh, understanding a little bit about what the Bible is, about the ESV translation, about what the ESV Study Bible is, and how to use it. Then we got into the primeval history of Genesis chapter 1 to 11. We saw the creation week, then God resting on the seventh day. Then chapter 2, we got uh, a more nuanced view, a highlighted view of what happened on day 6 when God created man. We saw the fall in the garden um, in chapter 3, where then uh, the serpent, the woman, and the man were all given consequences of their sin. However, amidst the consequences, there was a promise of an offspring of the woman who would crush the head of the serpent, but the serpent would bite his heel. Um, and so there's been a looking forward to see who that offspring is. Right after this, we see the woman is with child. Her first offspring is Cain, and then her second offspring is Abel. Cain becomes jealous of Abel and kills him. And then we get a we get a genealogy of Abel's descendants, and it does not look like that this is the once promised offspring that might fix things, that might crush the head of the serpent. Um, and so then there is another offspring of the woman, Seth. And then we get a genealogy down his line. We get all the way to Noah. Um, and he looks like he could be that offspring. He is prophesied to um, kind of reverse the curse and to bring rest back to humanity. And so there are ways in which the prophecy of his father, the naming of Noah, the way he did, that Noah fulfills those things. One, there's a flood, so there's no more working for people because they all die in the flood except for Noah and his family. But then afterwards, Noah finds success uh, from the ground as he toils the ground. Um, and then in doing so, he consumes the fruit of the vine a little excessively. Is drunk and then has a encounter with his son Ham, and then he therefore goes on to present his own cursing down to his grandson, the son of his son Ham, so his grandson Canaan. And then from there, we get genealogy of the table of nations of 70 different uh, types of people that come um, from um, Noah's sons and how they spread out into different places on earth in their languages. From there, there is a story about the Tower of Babel, where people there try to create a tower that reaches up to heaven in order to make a name for themselves. God goes and thwarts their plans in order to send them out onto the earth to be fruitful and to multiply, so that his image is throughout the earth. From there, we're introduced to a young man named Abram. We're introduced to him, his cousin, or his nephew Lot, and his wife Sarai, who is barren and cannot have children. From there, we see that Abram has a special relationship with God, where God continuously is promising to make him into a great name, make him into a great nation. He's promising kings to come from his line. He is promising that that a son will come from his body that will inherit all that God has blessed him with. Now, knowing that his wife is barren and cannot have children, and his wife knows that, they concoct a plan to try to let Abram have a son through their slave Haggai, and so they go through that. Ishmael is born, but then God reiterates that Ishmael is will be blessed, but he is not the offspring of promise, but that an offspring, a son, will come from Sarai, who is going to be renamed Sarah. Abram is going to be renamed Abraham at this conversation here that God has with him. But at the news of his wife being able to have a child, Abraham laughs because he just finds it ridiculous that his wife of 90 years old would bear a child. We see the Lord come to visit Abraham with a couple of people with him. And this promise is reiterated. And Sarah also laughs. God is flabbergasted at the least at her laughter because he has had this conversation already with Abram. And he asks Abraham, why is she laughing? Is anything too hard for God? And so, but there is a promise that a year later he will make sure that she is with child. Throughout this time, we see different bouts of faith where Abraham has great faith, and then times where Abraham kind of shrinks. There are times where he goes out and risks himself to save his cousin Lot in war. There are times where he is offered much, and he says no to it because he is dependent upon God. But then there are other times when it seems that, like him trying to take things to his own hands with Haggai, he tries to take his life into his hands to protect himself rather than having a high faith that the Lord will keep him alive in order to see and fulfill certain promises. He decides to concoct certain schemes to protect himself. And so he does this with his wife when they go down to Egypt during a plague. He tells the Pharaoh there that Sarai at the time was not his wife, but his sister, in order to protect himself. But then later, we see him have great faith and boldness when it comes to conversing with God before God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. and pleading with God to act justly and mercifully to protect the innocent while he punishes the guilty. And so with that, we have our backdrop for what we will be discussing this evening. We will be in Genesis chapter 20 to chapter 23, only 96 verses, but we are keeping it going. All right. Genesis chapter 20. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. And he journeyed to Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had not approached her. So he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister'?" And she herself said, "He is my brother." In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this. And God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did this thing?" Abraham said, I did it because I thought there's no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, "This is the kindness you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, 'He is my brother.'" Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah, his wife, to him. And Abimelech said, "Behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you." To Sarah he said, "Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you. And before everyone, you are vindicated." Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, and also healed his wife and female slaves, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, "God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me." And she said, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." And the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread, a skin of water, and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, let me not look on the death of the child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy, and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Haran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. Now, therefore, swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my descendants or with my posterity. But as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where we have sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. When Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart, and Abimelech said to Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart? He said, these 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well. Therefore, that place was called Beersheba, because there both of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned. Goodness, I keep messing this word up. Sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him. and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you." And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order to bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, "The Lord will provide," as it is to this day. On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham lived at Beersheba. Now after these things, it was told to Abraham, "Behold, Micah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. Uz, his firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel followed Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Moreover, his concubine, whose name was Reumah, bore Taba, Gaham, Tahash, and Maacah. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is, Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, "I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight." The Hittites answered Abraham, "Hear us, my lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead." Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land, and said to them, "If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron, the son of Zehor, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, of all who went in at the gate of the city, no, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, but if you will hear me, I give the price of the field. Accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, my lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver, what is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field, throughout its whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites, before all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is, Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites. This is the word of the Lord. All right. Chapter 20, verses 1 to 18. Abimelech takes Sarah into his harem. Abimelech's actions place in jeopardy the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham that Sarah will bear him a son, closely resembling the earlier taking of Sarah by Pharaoh. This account presupposes the reader's knowledge of that event. Chapter 20, verse 1. No specific reason is given for Abraham's relocation to Gerar in the northern Negev. Abraham and Sarah are unknown to the inhabitants of the region. Give me 1 second. Let me see today. No, there's no map here. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me get a map on this. Sorry about the silence there. Just so we can see what we're working with. I want to try to get a map here inside of our photos for the evening. Let's sync it now, just so we know where we are. Okay, here we go. We're at the end here. Okay, so this is the modern day map of the Middle East today. All right, Hebron, Gerar. Yeah, nothing on this map tells us anything. Let's see. Negev. Toward the territory of the Negev. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can find a map that might show us what we're looking for. Just so we have a reference of Kadesh and Shur. Shur. Man, I'm sorry, guys. I wish I had something prepared here that would help me. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Let's see. Gerar, Kadesh, and Shur. All right, so it's the Negev here. Okay. All right, let's do this page. Let's see. Okay, here. Sorry it took so long. Okay, so here is the Negev. Right here. Here's Gerar. All right. So I'm guessing. So they were in Mamre. Came here. There's Beersheba. Yeah, Philistia. So it's Kadesh Barnea. So we're somewhere over here. So Sodom and Gomorrah on this side of the Black Sea. Mamre here. Hebron. Zoar is over here. So we're somewhere in this area. Somewhere over here to the southwest of where he was before. Okay. Oh. So, yeah, closer towards the Mediterranean Sea, closer towards Egypt. Okay. All right, let's get back to it. Okay. All right. Chapter 20, verse 2. She is my sister. This comment presupposes the reader is familiar with chapter 12, verses 11 to 13, which explains the rationale behind Abraham's words. Evidently, Sarah looked much younger than her real age. Yeah, because, this whole deal of, hey, she's my sister, right? Because she's so beautiful, they're going to want to kill me in order to get to you. Deal. So, she must have, hey, she's making it happen at 90, making it happy. Making it happy, making it happen at 90. So apparently, Abimelech, king of Gerar. Abimelech, which means my father is king, appears to have been a common royal name. The same name is mentioned in chapter 26. See note on chapter 26, verses 1 and 2, and is given to later biblical figures. There is just a bit of foreshadowing. Isaac has a similar episode with his wife and Abimelech later on, and so there's question on if this is the same Abimelech or not. Some years later, or it was just like the royal title, just like Pharaoh title of king of Egypt. If Abimelech is just the kingly title for the leader of this region. Chapter 20, verses 3 to 6. But God came to Abimelech. God intervenes to ensure that Abimelech does not touch Sarah. In contrast to chapter 12, verses 10 to 20, this episode emphasizes in a variety of ways the important point that Sarah has not had intercourse with the king. Otherwise, Abimelech could be the father of the son born to Sarah in chapter 21, 1 to 3. Right? So it's important, right, that this story is told to make sure that there's no funny business going on, that, hey, Isaac may not be Abraham's son. You know, they went over to the Negev. You know how Abimelech gets down. You know, somebody comes in there, he has a harem, you know, he's going to make sure that he's treated very well by his visitors, right? And so we have this episode here where it's like, hey, no. There was no touching of Sarah, right? You know, so Abimelech could not be the father, right? There's no need for, you know, Maury of, you know, 2000 BC to come up and say, Abimelech, you're not the father. No need for all that, because he was kept from touching Sarah. Another thing to note here is, so we get God speaking with Abraham. Hold on one second. Let me pull up. Let me pull up Genesis 12 real quick, because I can't remember if he talks to Pharaoh or not. What happens? There's a famine in the land. Yeah. So here, okay. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Right? So here, God afflicts Pharaoh, right? But we don't get a nothing in the text said that God discussed anything with Pharaoh, right? We just have, hey, one day Pharaoh's fine. This woman comes into his house. Next thing you know, everybody's afflicted with some sort of disease, except for Sarai. He's like, oh, hey, man, what is this thing? You know, what's happening? All right. We aren't told how he found out that she was his wife. But the text just says that the Lord afflicted Pharaoh with great plagues. Right? Maybe he spoke with him, but we don't get a conversation at all. Right? We've had God talking directly with Adam and with Eve, talking directly with Cain, talking directly with Noah. We get him coming down to see what's happening at the Tower of Babel, but We don't see him necessarily have a conversation with folks there. We see him talk with Abram, and then talk with Sarah. Other than that, and Haggai. I keep calling her Haggai. Hagar. Goodness gracious. Sorry about that, guys. Hagar. He talks with Hagar, right? But Hagar is a part of their household, their family, right? So maybe she believes in God as well. Even before her encounter with the angel of the Lord out in the desert the first time that Sarah kicked her out. But we don't see him having a discussion at all with anyone outside of this line, right? From Adam to, Cain, Adam's son. And then after that, it says people began to call on the Lord, right? And remember, I said that, some people think that this is a reference to the distance of God, right? Where God was much more personal before Seth. And then after that, people began to call on the Lord, right? So that's, get that Genesis 5, right? Let me make sure. I'm remembering that right. There it is. Genesis chapter 4. Yeah. So after we see, Seth is born, and then Seth has a son whose name is Enosh, and it says at that time people began to call on the name of the Lord, right? So then there's, some scholars think, and I'm of this opinion, that this right here starts to denote distance between God and humans, where there's not this, personal contact as much now, right? So there's a distance now between God and humans, right? Where, he can have contact here and there, but for the most part, there's a distance, right? And so after that, he walks with Enoch, someone within Seth's line. He talks with Noah, someone within Seth's line. He talks with Abram, someone within Seth's line, right? And within the line of Noah. And then he talks with people inside of Noah's household, but no one since then. But yet today, he comes and speaks to Abimelech, someone who's outside of the covenant family, right? But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, wow, he's speaking to Abimelech in dreams. And he says that he was the one who kept him innocent. All right. God said to him in a dream, yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart. And it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Hey, if you would have done this, you'd have been sinning against me. I got things I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get done. Right? Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Right? So not only is he speaking with Abimelech, someone outside of the covenant family of Abraham. Okay? But he is keeping them from sinning. Pretty profound there. Pretty profound. And we get this comment from Abraham. He says he did this whole thing because he thought there's no fear of God at all in this place. Hey, they don't fear God. They don't know Yahweh. They don't fear him. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But God sure enough came and spoke to them. Sure enough. In a dream by night, throughout Genesis, dreams are often used as a medium of divine revelation. Yeah. And so we see this, we'll see this coming up repeatedly throughout the rest of Genesis. Chapter 20, verse 7, Abraham is the first person in the Bible to be designated a prophet. In this context, attention is drawn to his ability to intercede on behalf of others, one of the characteristics of a great prophet. Jeremiah chapter 15, verse 1. Cross-references actions in Genesis chapter 18, verse 22 to 33. Yes, we saw that. His direct discussions with the Lord, trying to speak on behalf of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? In particular, in his mind, he had Lot, his nephew, and his family in mind. But in order to save them, he's trying to save the city. And so he's interceding, right? Something a prophet's able to do, speak directly with the Lord. And it says it's a characteristic of a great prophet. Let's see this Jeremiah verse. I'm not quite familiar with it off the top of my head. So let's see what they're talking about. And the Lord said to him, through Moses and Samuel, though Moses and Samuel stood before me, yet my heart would not turn toward this people. Send them out of my sight and let them go. And when they ask you, where shall we go? You shall say to them, thus says the Lord. Okay. So Moses and Samuel are prophets who stood before God. Jeremiah himself is a prophet standing before God. And there's episodes of both of Moses and Samuel trying to intercede on behalf of the people. Moses is definitely successful in his attempt in doing so. Samuel, it's hard to say. We'll get there to see if he's successful or not, or if that's I don't know if you can call it success or no success. His situation. All right, let's get back to where we were. Chapter 20, verse 9, Abimelech richly challenges Abraham for deceiving him about the status of Sarah as his wife. The term great sin sometimes denotes adultery. Let's see this. Verse 9, they say, I sin against you that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin. They say, hey, what have I done to you for you to do this grievous thing to me? Have I done anything to you? You do this great thing, this great wrong thing to me. Chapter 20, verse 11, there's no fear of God at all in this place. Abraham's response betrays both his lack of faith in God and his misjudgment of the people of Gerar. The whole episode reveals that the king and his servants were God-fearing. Verses 5, 8, and 16. I don't know. Let's see if there's anything. Verse 5. Did he not himself say to me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all the things. And the men were very much afraid. What's the other verse that they had? 5, 8, and 16. Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver as a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated. I don't know how they are getting that these people fear God, not in the sense of what this is meant. Fear God in the sense of belief in Him, um, acknowledging Him, fear Him as far as reverence toward Him. They have decent actions, and in one sense, they are afraid, but at this point, they've already been afflicted. They've been afflicted. Something happened, and they were very afraid. Hey, something's going on. So this could be very much read like they are afraid of consequences, not afraid in the sense that they revere God and worship Him and want to serve Him. Mm, I would say this could be very reminiscent of Cain. Cain's fear of the consequences of God. Uh, I don't know about that. About I would say that to me, the way this reads is that there should be a surprise. This not only within the story, but within the context of the Old Testament and within the context of the Bible, right? That the audience, especially again, if we are assuming the audience is the Israelites in the desert, right? Who at this time have been told by God that they are His chosen people, right? And that they are chosen to show His light to the rest of the world, that others may come to believe, right? So they know that they have a special relationship with God. They come down the line of Abraham, right? And there's a clear distinction between them and other people. And it is always noteworthy when someone who is not of them comes in and shows faith, or comes in and there's some connection that God has with them that as well, right? And so here there should be a whoa, hey, you know, this might be a moral guy, but this guy he's not within the covenant family of Abraham, and yet God comes to him in a dream. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm not seeing it well. Maybe I'm misreading it, but I don't know. We'll see. Every once in a while, me and the ESV Study Bible disagree on some things. You know, maybe I'm speaking on semantics, or it's not nuanced the way that I would like it or something. I don't know, but I think what is supposed to be a surprise to the reader that hey, though God has this particular covenant with Abraham and his household, that like Abraham, who's supposed to be a blessing to the rest of the world, right? And those who bless him, God will bless. And we start to see that happen here with Abimelech. So, chapter 20, verses 12 to 13. Besides, She is indeed my sister. Abraham's explanation, which is a half truth, does not excuse his behavior. At every place to which we come, Abraham regularly resorted to his wife's sister ruse, verse 12, for his own self-protection. Genesis chapter 12, chapter 12 and 20 reveal that it did not always work. Only God's intervention protects Abraham's relationship with Sarah, a point that should not be lost on the first audience, right? That it is not Abraham's actions that save him, but it is God's actions, God's intervention that protects him, not Abraham's cunning. Chapter 20, verses 14 and 16. Abimelech's generosity. Oh, give me 1 second. Let me see. Where. Let's go back to Genesis 12. Let's see, 11 to 12. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in the Ur of Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran. The father of Milcah and Iscah. So Nahor's wife is his niece. Sarai was barren. She had no child. Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years. I don't see anything in the text. I don't see anything in the text that says that Sarai is the daughter of Terah. Sarai. Yeah. So I don't know. Is Abraham fibbing? What's going on here? Yeah. Maybe I can look that up. Give me 1 second. Let me see. I'm very interested in this. Where in the text? Where in the text does it say that they're half siblings? Okay. Yeah, only here does it say that. Yeah. So we don't even know. We don't even know if Abraham is telling the truth. We can't even confirm it. He's just saying it here. Maybe he's telling the truth. We don't know. But yeah. All right. Chapter 20, verse 14 to 16. Abimelech's generosity on top of his innocence contrasts sharply with Abraham's self-serving deception regarding the truth about Sarah. The king's actions are a very public affirmation that he has acted inappropriately towards Sarah, that he has not acted inappropriately towards Sarah, and thus he is not the father of any children she may have. One thing that, as I was reading the story, one thing that I was wondering is if the particular amount that he gave was that something significant. Behold, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you. To Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all. I wonder if this 1,000 pieces of silver, like if that was a thing, you know, hey, the price of a virgin or something, in that culture, right? I wonder that. And thus he is not the father of any children she may have. Right. All right. Chapter 20, verses 17 to 18. The healing of Abimelech and the restoration of his wife and female slaves so that they may once again have children underlines God's power over fertility. By noting that these things are restored, the narrator prepares the way for the birth of Isaac, chapter 21, verses 1 to 3. By observing that Abraham prays, the narrative picks up on the theme of God's blessing being mediated through Abraham, right? We spoke about that, right? Where chapter 12, verse 3 talks about him being a blessing to those who bless him. Okay. Chapter 21, verses 1 to 21, the birth of Isaac, in fulfillment of God's promise. Sarah bears Abraham a son who is named Isaac. Oh man, the promised offspring is here. In due course, Isaac is confirmed as Abraham's heir when God instructs Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away. While Isaac takes priority over Ishmael, God does not abandon Hagar or her son. Chapter 21, verse 1, as he had promised. All right. See chapter 17 when he makes the promise. Chapter 21, verse 2, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Right. So he said that in about a year, she will be with child. And it's a year later, Isaac is born. 21:3, Isaac, the name was announced by God to Abraham in chapter 17, verse 19. Right. And the name itself means laughter. We went over that last time. And so you at first have where Abraham and Sarah both laugh because they think the idea is ridiculous. Now they laugh because they have joy. And everyone else will laugh out of joy, but that it is so ridiculous that only God can do it. Right? So at first it was laughter. There's no way this can happen. Now there's laughter and joy because there's no way this could happen outside of the hand of God. Chapter 21, verse 4. Isaac is circumcised by Abraham in fulfillment of God's instructions. Chapter 17, verse 12, right? The circumcising of the boys on the 8th day, right? A new beginning. chapter 21, verses 5 to 7. These verses underline the unexpected nature of Isaac's birth. Abraham and Sarah are both very old. Chapter 21, verse 8. On the day that Isaac was weaned, Isaac was probably 2 or 3 years old. So let's read verse 8 real quick. Verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Okay, yeah. Okay, because they're talking about the event of the banishing of Hagar and Ishmael. Chapter 21, verse 9. The Hebrew verb translating laughing is ambiguous. It may be interpreted as denoting either mocking or playing. Right? So you get before Isaac's birth, Abraham and Sarah both laugh at the idea because it's ridiculous. Now they're laughing and having joy because it's too ridiculous, only God can do it. But then Ishmael is laughing because, hey, I'm bigger and better than you, right? Because remember, what was prophesied about him, right? That he's going to be fighting with his kin. The verb form used here possibly favors mocking. Galatians chapter 4, verse 29 follows this interpretation. Ishmael was probably making fun of Isaac's role as Abraham's promised son. Okay. All right, we looked at Galatians chapter 3 last time. Now let's look at Galatians. Again, we'll look at Galatians 3 to 4. Galatians 3 to 4. All right, we won't read the whole thing. Let's put the verse numbers on here so we can see. All right, 4 to 29. Is it 4:29? Now brothers like Isaac. Now you, brothers like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he was born according to the flesh, he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him who was born according to the spirit, and so it is now. Okay. All right, let's go. This is pretty significant. We'll read this idea that that Paul traces back to this story and the theological significance, especially how it plays out in the life of Christians. But really, his theology is that this is how it always has been, right? That there is a difference between those of natural birth and spiritual birth, right? O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? It was before your eyes that Jesus Christ was publicly betrayed as crucified. Let me ask you only this. Did you receive the Spirit by works of the law or by hearing with faith? Are you so foolish, having begun by the Spirit? Are you now being perfected by the flesh? Did you suffer so many things in vain? If indeed it was in vain. Does he who supplies the Spirit to you and works miracles among you do so by works of the law or by hearing with faith. Just as Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. All right, Genesis 15. Know then that it is those of faith who are the sons of Abraham. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, in you shall all the nations be blessed. Right? We just saw that with Abimelech. Outside of the household of Abraham, not in his line, not in his household, yet he is blessed by him. So then, those who are of faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith. For all who rely on works of the law are under a curse, for it is written, cursed be everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law and do them. Now it is evident that no one is justified before God by the law, for the righteous shall live by faith. But the law is not of faith, rather, the one who does them shall live by them. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree, so that in Christ Jesus, the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles, so that we might receive the promised Spirit through faith. To give a human example, brothers, even with a man-made covenant, no one annuls it or adds to it once it has been ratified. Now the promises were made to Abraham and to his offspring. It does not say and to offsprings, referring to many, but referring to one, and to your offspring, who is Christ. This is what I mean. The law, which came 430 years afterward, does not annul a covenant previously ratified by God, so as to make the promise void. For if the inheritance comes by the law, it no longer comes by promise, but God gave it to Abraham by a promise. Why then the law? It was added because of transgressions, until the offspring should come to whom the promise had been made. And it was put in place through angels by an intermediary. Now, an intermediary implies more than one, but God is one. Is the law then contrary to the promises of God? Certainly not. For if a law had been given that could give life, then righteousness would indeed be by the law. But the scripture imprisoned everything under sin, so that the promise by faith in Jesus Christ might be given to those who believe. Now, before faith came, we were held captive under the law, imprisoned until the coming faith would be revealed. So then, the law was our guardian until Christ came, in order that we might be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian. For in Christ Jesus, you are all sons of God through faith. For as many of you as were baptized in Christ Jesus have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male and female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise. I mean that the heir, as long as he is a child, is no different from a slave, though he is the owner of everything. But he is under guardians and managers until the date set by his father. In the same way, we also, when we were children, were enslaved to the elementary principles of the world. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the spirit of his son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature are not God's. But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elementary principles of the world, whose slaves you want to be once more? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid I have labored over you in vain. Brothers, I entreat you, become as I am, for I also have become as you are. You did me no wrong. You know that it is because of a bodily ailment that I preached the gospel to you at first. And though my condition was a trial to you, you did not scorn or despise me, but received me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus. What then has become of your blessedness? For I testify to you that, if possible, you would have gouged out your eyes and given them to me. Have I then become your enemy by telling you the truth? They make much of you, but for no good purpose. They want to shut you out, that you may make much of them. It is always good to be much of for a good purpose, and not only when I am present with you, my little children, for whom I am again in the anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. I wish I could be present with you now and change my tone, for I am perplexed about you. Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. But the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman was born through promise. Now, this may be interpreted allegorically. These women are two covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. She is Hagar. Now, Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. She corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. For it is written, rejoice, O barren one who does not bear. Break forth and cry aloud, you who are not in labor. For the children of the desolate one will be more than those of the one who has a husband. Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time, he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him, who was born according to the Spirit, so also it is now. But what does the scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. So, brothers, we are not children of the slave, but of the free woman. All right. I read the whole thing just to have in our minds at least the theological implications of these narratives. It's not just stories going along, but there's something that is trying to be communicated over and over again in the Old Testament text. It doesn't get laid out as clearly as that what Paul just laid out in Galatians. But once you know and understand the overall story, you start to see it over and over and over again in these mini stories. You know what I'm saying? Chapter 21, verse 10. Although Ishmael is Abraham's son, Sarah does not want him to be an heir alongside Isaac. Paul uses Sarah's words in his allegory of the two covenants, which what we just read. Chapter 21, verses 11 to 13. Hold on one second. Chapter. Okay. Verse 12. All right, chapter 21, verses 11 to 13. While Abraham is reluctant to send Ishmael away, God reassures him that this is for the best. Chapter 21, verse 12. Through Isaac shall your offspring be named. Even though Ishmael is older than Isaac, God confirms that Isaac will take priority over Ishmael. The importance of this is picked up in Romans chapter 9, verse 7, and Hebrews chapter 11, verse 18. All right, we won't go there, but there is something that I want to look at real quick. Let's go to Bible Hub. BibleHub.com. All right. Genesis 20, 12. Okay. No, 21. Okay. All right. This is why I wanted to do this, because this is why it's good to read multiple translations. Okay. Man, there's only one translation to do this. Okay. King James does it. New King James does it. Some of you know where I'm going. American Standard Version, English Revised Version. Some of you know where I'm going. Okay. All right. So we spoke before about this pattern that we had seen so far, where God had a conversation, gave a command, gave an instruction, gave a prophecy to the husband. And then right after that, the next scene, that conversation is either put to the test or comes into play. And it seems like the wives don't quite get it. All right. And then we see that we get this phrase when Adam is being cursed, right? What is his charge? God says, Genesis chapter 3. To the man, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree. So, man, listen to the voice of your wife. Man, this seems like a bad thing. Genesis 16. Genesis 16, Sarai comes up with this great idea, right? Right after God tells him that he's going to get a child from his womb, or it's from his womb, from his body, from his own body to be an heir, right? He must have had a conversation with Sarai about this. And so she comes up with this great idea. And what does he do? He listened to the voice of his wife. Listen to the voice of Sarai. Adam listened to the voice of his wife. Things went wrong. Abram listened to the voice of his wife. Things went wrong. Now, if someone's reading that and they're seeing this pattern, right? They're thinking, oh man, it's not a good thing for a man to listen to the voice of his wife. This patriarchal Bible trying to put women down, the voice of the woman down. Okay? That's what some people might get. Right? And I said, and I couldn't find it. I was like, man, why can't I find this? Right? But it's because in the English Standard Version, they don't put it like this. But this is why you have to read other versions, because sometimes certain things are brought out that are not brought out in certain versions, right? So rarely do I read the King James or New King James version, but I saw this in the Legacy Standard Bible. This is where I first saw it, right? This is now God speaking to Abraham. So God said to Abraham, do not be distressed because of the boy and your maidservant. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. Oh, snap. For through Isaac, your seed shall be named. Okay. Hey, before this, we had 2 times before this. A husband listened to the voice of his wife, things went wrong. But now God is saying, listen to her voice. So, where someone could have gotten, oh, hey, here's a pattern. So that means it's wrong to listen to the voice of the wife. Now you get the wrong interpretation now. Because it's not the voice of the wife itself that is in the wrong. It is how much does what the wife is saying at that time, how much does that accord with what God either has said or what God is doing? The first time, God clearly told him, do not eat this. But Eve gives him the fruit, he eats it. There's a clear, hey, God said don't do this, but listen to your wife. Said do something else. So it's not that he listened to his wife, but he listened to the thing that was going against what God had said. For Sarai, God didn't necessarily tell him that the son was coming from him and Sarai, but that it was coming from his body. But instead of letting God play that out, he listens to the voice of his wife, who tries to construct a natural occurrence instead of letting the impossible happen through God. So because the thing that she wanted to do, or the thing that she came up with, what he listened to, was against what God was doing, things went wrong. But here, God is already establishing, and Paul notices that there's a difference between the child of promise and the child of natural birth. There's a difference between the family of promise and the inheritance that comes to the family of promise and the family of natural birth. And so because God is already establishing this and making this go out, Sarah is now speaking in alignment with the Lord. And so what does the Lord say? Listen to the voice of your wife. So do not think that the Bible is speaking against the wisdom of women, or that the Bible is speaking against trying to set up some sort of hierarchy between the intelligence of women and the intelligence of men. It is not. And I don't know if I brought this out on day one when there was a discussion about making a helper for the man, right? Where to making him a helper had nothing to do with and just that particular line. Now we do see we've seen the hierarchy between husband and wife. We have seen that gets established, but not in that line. That line is not getting established as like a master servant relationship, right? But that line is more, he needs a helper because he's insufficient to do the work that I'm asking him to do. So it's not because of her positioning, but because of his insufficiency. Because the Hebrew word that is used for helper is most often associated with God as our help. And the Bible clearly is not saying that God is under us, right? So the point here is any voice that is in alignment with the Lord can and should be listened to. Any voice that is not should not be listened to, because later on we're going to see this pattern, right, where our antennas should go off whenever we're told that so and so listen to the voice of, right? Because then we should think, okay, is this voice in alignment with the Lord or is it not? And is this the narrator's way of trying to alert us that, hey, something bad's about to happen? Okay. So think about that. Let's look at the interlinear, because I don't think that maybe the Hebrew there doesn't have the word voice in here. Displeasing. Listen. Bekola. Let's see. Voice, sound, noise. Yeah, to the voice of your wife, 317. All right. Laban says, listen to my voice. He listened to the voice of Sarai. Right. Hearken to her voice. What is the NAS? I wonder if there's like because the NAS doesn't have this. I wonder if maybe there might be a different use of manuscript or something. Why they don't have it there, right? Okay, so there we go. All right. So I was like, man, it's somewhere, right? But that's why that right there is why it is important to read different translations, because there are certain things that you'll see in one translation that you won't see in another. One of the things about the Legacy Standard Bible, and this kind of goes into the translation philosophy. One of the things that the Legacy Standard Bible wanted to try to do is there are certain pictures and connections that are within the story, right? That is beyond the words, right? Beyond the surface of the words, that are beneath the surface. That only if you know the story that you know that a connection is trying to be made, right? And so, and it's not necessarily a thought that's trying to. So we talked about the different translations philosophy before, like a word for word, thought for thought, or paraphrase, uh, different translations, right? And so what they are trying to do is not necessarily get to only the words on the page, but also to the ideas behind the words, right? In their translation philosophy. So their translation philosophy, they're trying to make sure that certain patterns are recognized, right? The seasoning and the flavors and the colors and the smells come off the page, basically, right? Is what they're trying to do in the Legacy Standard Bible, right? They come, it's kind of word for word, but then they try to, within their word for word translation, try to make sure that the flavor of the text comes out as well as the meaning, because once you get the flavor, you also it helps you with the meaning, right? So I don't know a better way to say it. Maybe at some point we might have to read the Legacy Standard Bible preface to understand their translation philosophy, but so they get at that sense, of, oh, hey, here's the story's moving in a different place, right? Listen to the voice of your wife, something bad happens. Listen to the voice of your wife, something bad happens. Now God says, listen to the voice of your wife. All right. Is something bad going to happen again? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. So that was chapter 21. Okay. All right. Chapter 21, verse 14. Putting it on her shoulder along with the child. While these words might suggest that Ishmael was placed on Hagar's shoulder, this is hardly likely, since Ishmael is about 16 years old at this time. The last thing Abraham did was to give Ishmael to Hagar, probably after putting the bread and water, on Hagar's shoulder. The Hebrew term for child, Hebrew yaled, may denote an older teenager. It is used, for example, of Joseph in chapter 37, verse 30. Let's see. Okay. Here, I think it said he was 17 when he left. Dang, we'll get there. This is when Joseph is sold into slavery. I think we are told that he is 17 at this time. But Yaled, 30. The boy is gone. Yaled is gone. Wilderness of Beersheba. Water was difficult to find in this region. Man-made wells appear to have been the main source of water. See chapter 21, verse 30, which we'll get to later. On Beersheba, see note on 21:31. All right, we'll get there. Chapter 21, verses 15 to 16. When the water in the skin is exhausted and no other supply has been found, Hagar weeps in despair. Okay. Chapter 21, verses 17 to 18. God's intervention saves Hagar and confirms to her that her son will become a great nation. Verse 18, echoing the promise given to Abraham in verse 13. God heard the voice of the boy. Verse 17. Although this passage avoids using the personal name Ishmael, means God hears, right? Which echoes what Hagar says when she is kicked out and the angel of the Lord comes to her and speaks to her. Although it was Ishmael's misbehavior that led to the expulsion from Abraham's household, God reaffirms his promise, I will make him into a great nation. Right, which is what was declared to her also too in chapter 16. Chapter 21, verse 21, wilderness of Paran, the central region in northern Sinai. What's happening there? He lived in the wilderness. And became an expert in the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Okay, Paran. Let's see. Do we get Paran? Trying to see on the map here, if at all. Let's see. They're at Beersheba, and then Paran. I don't see. Sinai. Oh, El Paran, maybe down here, because Egypt is over here in this area. All right, so Paran, maybe down here. Egypt right here, where the wife comes from. Okay. Maybe there. Northern Sinai. Northern Sinai. Yeah, it must be here, because this is the Red Sea. Yeah, I think this is Sinai. Let me see if there's another map in the back that shows Sinai. Man. Okay, I see Sinai on this particular map, but wilderness of Shur. Wilderness of Paran. Okay. So yeah. So it's right under Kadesh. Yeah. Kadesh Barnea, right here. Yeah. So this is where he is, where he decides to live. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and get the move on. All right. Chapter 21, verses 22 to 34, Abimelech makes a treaty with Abraham. Acknowledging Abraham's power, Abimelech establishes with him a treaty intended to protect both parties. Chapter 21, verse 22 to 23, Abimelech, see note on chapter 20, verse 2, God is with you in all that you do. Abimelech attributes Abraham's success to God. All right. So maybe there's a conversion. Or maybe not, because we see later on that other people acknowledge that other folks who God has blessed, they acknowledge this, that God is with them, but it does not change their relationship with the Lord. Just they acknowledge that God is with that particular person. Chapter 21, verse 25 to 30. Before sealing the treaty, Abraham raises the continuous issue of ownership of a well. Right? So he wants to make sure, hey, look, I don't want y'all to get this to me. I want to own it outright. Maybe there could be a conversation about property rights, but we won't get to it here. Or the importance of private property, but we won't get to it here. The covenant or treaty was designed to prevent conflict. The gift of 7 ewe lambs. Dang, man, I was hoping they were going to have something about the 7 ewe lambs, why that is. Maybe we might see something like that in Leviticus or something like that. Ewe lamb or something, but okay. Chapter 21, verse 31. In light of Abraham's gift to Abimelech, the name Beersheba probably means well of 7. However, given that the Hebrew words for 7, Sheba, and oath, Shabua, are similar, it could also mean the well of the oath. Perhaps the name was chosen because it embraced both concepts. Given Abraham's semi-nomadic lifestyle and the need for him to dig a well, no settlement probably existed at this location in his time. When a permanent settlement was later established in this area, the name of the well was given to it. The town of Beersheba, located in the northern Negev, became famous as marking the southern boundary of Israel. For example, Judges chapter 21, verse 1, and 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 20. One thing I'm hoping happens throughout this year, and one thing that I have not been good at in the last over the last 3 years doing the year in the Bible, so really the last 2 is and when I say the last 2, I did it, so this would be my 4th year. But I was hoping over the last 2 years after doing it my first year to be able to recognize certain names or certain locations throughout the story. And I think I have not gotten good at it, which is kind of why I keep stopping and looking at the maps to try to see where things are, is because as the story goes along and I hear of a particular town, I want my mind to go off like, oh, hey, this happened at this place and da da da. This is pretty significant because of X, Y, and Z, right? I want my mind to automatically do that, but it has not done it. So I am praying and hoping that this year, as we go through the study Bible, that it does. And maybe we'll get some reminders through the notes and stuff like that. So maybe we'll see. All right, 21, chapter 21, verse 32, land of the Philistines. The use of the term Philistines here is generally taken to be anachronistic, since the name is normally associated with non-Canaanites from the Aegean region who inhabited southwest Canaan from about 1180 BC onward, nearly 1,000 years after Abraham's time. In 1 Samuel, the Philistines are portrayed as the main opponents of the Israelites. In light of this, the term may be used here and elsewhere to replace an earlier obscure term. Genesis contains various examples of such modernizations. See note on Genesis chapter 14, verse 13 and 16. Also, introduction, author title, and date. Alternatively, archaeological evidence from various sites in Canaan points to the possibility that some people from the Aegean region, especially Crete and Cyprus, may have already been settled in southwest Canaan. This raises the possibility that Abraham and Isaac, see chapter 26, had dealings with people who came from the same area as the later Philistines. Okay, so they're saying there is some, but maybe limited archaeological evidence that, okay, no, never mind. I understand what I'm saying now. So they're saying that that there's a possibility that some people from that region. Hold on, let's read the verse real quick. 21:32. Therefore, that place is called Beersheba. So they had a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. So are they saying to the Aegean region? Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry, guys. I'm looking at a map again and try to see if I can understand exactly where they are talking about. Damascus, Cyprus. Okay. So the note said the Aegean region inhabited southwest Canaan. Okay. Aegean region, Crete and Cyprus. So I don't see Crete on here, but this map, Cyprus is right here. Oh, Crete right here. Yeah. So they went on a ship. I don't know. I'm a little lost. I have to spend some more time studying that to try to figure out exactly what they mean there, where they went. But what it seems like the note is saying is that whatever region that the Philistines, right, who started being called that around 1180 BC, okay, which is roughly 1,000 years, 800 to 900 years after this time that we're talking about. Maybe what the redactors are saying, maybe this is a later note, something that was put into the text by a scribe as they're copying it down, so that people of that generation are able to understand where these people actually went. right? And so they went to wherever the Philistines of that time were living, right? And whatever name was put there was some name of a place that those people probably didn't know. And so the scribe just put, oh, this area, right? Because at the time, those people wouldn't have known, right? So, you know, it's almost like if someone, was translating down some Native American text, right? And there was a story there, and they referenced the place, and the place name they had, but they knew that the place they were talking about is Atlanta, and so oh yeah, they went to the land of Atlanta, even though the Native Americans weren't saying Atlanta, they're saying whatever they call the place there in their language. But for us in our time, we know where Atlanta is in Georgia, right? Or if they said Los Angeles, even though the people of that town didn't know where Los Angeles was, or New York City, right? But for us, we can make that reference, But if they just said the land, right, without saying this land, which is in modern day, that's how we would say it now. But back then, they just, to keep the story going, they just said, oh, this particular land. All right. Okay. Chapter 21, verse 33, everlasting God, Hebrew, El Olam. El Olam. In Hebrew, El is a common Semitic term for God, followed by the attribute of everlasting, Hebrew, Olam. All right. Which we saw this in chapter 14 when there was the interaction with Melchizedek. Chapter 22, verses 1 to 19. The testing of Abraham. This episode brings to a climax God's ongoing interaction with Abraham, resulting in an important divine oath. The conditional promises of chapter 12, verses 1 to 3 are now unconditionally guaranteed as a result of Abraham's preparedness to sacrifice his son. Put to the test, Abraham displays remarkable trust in God, especially when the death of Isaac would appear to contradict all that God had promised to Abraham. The passage conveys two truths for its original audience. Number one, it shows the kind of faith that Abraham had and commends it for Israel. And two, it shows that substitution is a part of the atoning sacrifices that God will direct Israel to offer. See note on 22:13. This further enables the people of Israel to see their very existence, even in the desert, as part of God's plan, which they must embrace. James chapter 2, verses 21 and 22 says that by Abraham's works here, his faith, from Genesis chapter 15, verse 6, was completed. That is, brought to its full, proper expression. This shows that justified in James chapter 2, verse 21, probably has the sense shown to be righteous rather than the sense counted righteous, often found in Paul's writings. See note on James chapter 2, verse 21. Let's go over to James. See what he's talking about. James chapter 2. So I know this is the faith without works is dead section. Start at verse 18. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown? Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works, not by faith alone. Okay. So faith in action. So here, James is getting at the fact that Abraham can say, oh man, I believe God, I believe God, I believe God. But the faith is really not complete until there is a testing, right? And so we see that his faith comes through once it is tested by fire. Okay. Chapter 21, verse 1, God tested Abraham. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, all right. The particular form of the verb tested makes this phrase a summary of the whole passage and clarifies the meaning of the events. The genuineness of Abraham's obedience to God is tested. While it is not unknown for God to test individuals, testing must be clearly distinguished from tempting. God does not tempt anyone to do evil. See note on James chapter 1, verse 13. He does, however, test the commitment of people. For example, Exodus chapter 15, verse 25, and Exodus chapter 16, verse 4. Real quick. Talk about Exodus 16. Okay. 25. And then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea. They went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore, it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And he cried to the Lord. And the Lord showed him a log. And he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statute and a rule. And there he tested them, saying, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord, your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Then they came to Elim. There were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died in the land by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, that we sat by when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. All right. So here we see God testing their faith through these particular trials. All right. They're thirsty. They can't drink the water because it's bitter. He's testing them. They're out there hungry. He's testing them. Okay. Chapter 22, verse 2. Your only son, Isaac, whom you love. With the departure of Ishmael from Abraham's household, Isaac had become Abraham's only son. As such, he was held with much affection by his father. Land of Moriah. According to 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1, Solomon constructed the temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. While Genesis 22 does not specify that the sacrifice of Isaac took place at or near Jerusalem, verse 14 possibly implies such a connection. A burnt offering involved the entire sacrifice being consumed by fire. The outcome of the incident makes it clear that God never intended the directive to be fulfilled. Thus, taken as a whole, in terms of both the command and the outcome, the incident cannot be seen to conflict with God's moral law, because this was by far the greatest demand that God could have made of Abraham. It confirmed the depth of the patriarch's commitment. Abraham was willing to kill his own son, although the author of Hebrews observes, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17 to 19, he prepared to do so, believing that God was able to bring Isaac back to life again. See note on Genesis 22, 5 to 8. Once we see that note, we might go to the Hebrews verse and discuss a few things. But let's see. Let me not jump the gun, as they say. Let's see if the scholars can handle this. Chapter 22, verse 3, Abraham rose early in the morning. Abraham promptly responds to the challenge placed before him, right? It's good there, right? Different things to notice, right? He didn't wait a week, right? Promptly, the next morning, got up, got to it. On the third day, it requires about 2 days to travel on foot from Beersheba to Jerusalem, a distance of about 45 miles, as the crow flies. Elsewhere, 2 days also represents the time set aside to prepare for a special encounter with God on the third day. See example, Exodus 19, verse 11. Perhaps this sets the pattern for the significant third day cross-reference. Matthew chapter 16, verse 21, chapter 1, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 4. Maybe. But one thing that I think that we should also see, right? We go back to the creation week, right? What happened on day one, what was separated on day one was filled on day 4, right? So you had day 1, you had the first, second, then on the third day it was filled. You had day 2, what was separated was filled on day 5. So you had day 2, first, second, third day it was filled, right? That, and then same with day 3, first, second, third day is filled. So you have that pattern, right, from the creation week also, and so that starts this whole, this breaking and then fulfilling on the third day pattern that we see through Scripture. I'm trying to see, does God tell him where to go? Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Okay. Why the land of Moriah? That's what I would want to know. Yeah, nothing in the text would have told us why that place. But here they're stating that this could be where Jerusalem is. So it could be for later reasons that he wanted him to go there. That we'll see later in the text. All right, chapter 22, verse 5 to 8. I and the boy will come again to you. While Abraham is committed to sacrificing Isaac, he plans to do so in the belief that that both of them will return. You see Hebrews chapter 11, verses 17 and 19. All right, let's read that real quick. Okay, chapter 5. Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. All right, so that's verse 5. Okay. God will provide the lamb. It is unclear whether Abraham is speaking ironically here. Isaac is the lamb, or whether he is expressing faith that somehow God will preserve his son. As it turns out, God does provide a substitute for Isaac. All right. Yeah, it is unclear, whether Abraham is speaking prophetically or speaking ironically, or maybe he's just saying something because he doesn't want to tell Isaac the truth, right? And based on our inability to confirm whether Sarah is his sister or not, we already seen earlier today. Sometimes Abraham just be talking, maybe not, right? It's not sure to confirm what is actually going on in the mind of Abraham. Sometimes in the story here. However, though, we do see a great act of faith here. Okay, something I do want to look at real quick. Sorry about this. I'm trying to pull something up here. Hebrews 11 notes. Okay. So something that I created for some of our students. Here. All right. So this idea of faith having three components, right? Faith in a particular thing because of certain things. Therefore, there is a reasonable expectation. Okay. And so I went through in the Hebrews chapter 11 certain things. Okay. So we have this here. Let's bring this. Let's bring this down a little bit. Oh, goodness. Do that down there so we can see the whole. So we can see the whole thing. Oh, Abraham's call. That's not what we're looking for. Oh. Okay. All right, here we go. And we'll look at Hebrews chapter 11 real quick. Hebrews 11. Let's just go 17 to 19. So we'll get this part here. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. All right, so that's the reference in Hebrews. Okay, and so the question is, why would Abraham even go through this whole charade, right? Well, it's because he had faith in God's promise, right? Because of when God first called Abraham, he promised to make him a great nation. Genesis chapter 12, verse 2. Later, God promised to give him an heir from his own body that would eventually produce offspring more numerous than the stars. Genesis chapter 15, verses 4 to 5. Then he promises that his offspring will inherit the land promised to him after 400 years of oppression in another land. Chapter 15, verses 13 to 16. Once Abraham received the word of this promise, he and Sarah conspired to give him an heir from his body through Hagar, the slave. Chapter 16, 1 through 4. After this, God comes to correct Abraham's thinking. The promised heir would not only come from his body, but Sarah's as well. Chapter 17, verses 15 to 19. Sometime later, Isaac was born in impossible circumstances. Chapter 21, verses 1 and 3. Abraham had been blessed by God and seen his faithfulness for over 25 years. God promised that he would have a son from both his body and Sarah's, even at ridiculously old ages. Yet, he, God, did the impossible and kept his word. If he kept his word concerning a promised child to a 90-plus-year-old woman, he would keep his promise to make offspring from this child that would be more numerous than the stars and inherit the land after 400 years of oppression. So this is in the back of Abraham's mind. Hey, I have seen God's faithfulness. Everything that he has said to me has come true. And he has done the impossible to even give me this child at this grand old age and allow the child to come from Sarah. And so I have to take him at his word. And so if he's asking me to do this, somehow he's going to keep his good on his word. So therefore, since Abraham knew that God would keep his promise to make numerous offspring come from Isaac, who would eventually come back and occupy the land, he figured that if he did as God asked and sacrificed his son, that God would still find a way to make good on his promise, even if it meant he would raise Isaac from the dead. Okay? This is what the trust is looking like. Hey, God, you said something. Now you're asking me to do something that seems like it might contradict what you said would happen before, but somehow I'm still going to trust you that what you said before would happen is going to happen. So now I'm going to do the thing that seems like it's opposite of what you said, because I know that, there's no contradiction in you. You can't lie, and that you always fulfill your promises. And so he goes through with this whole thing. I probably shouldn't have called it a charade, though. But he goes through with the testing. All right. Angel of the Lord. See note on chapter 16, verse 7. The repetition of the name Abraham. Abraham underscores the urgency of the intervention. Chapter 21, verse 12. Now that I know that you fear God, Abraham's action confirms his faithful obedience to God. Now, mind you, before we even continue with this note, because there was the assumption that Abimelech and his servants feared God, and Abraham accused them of not fearing God. I don't know if there's any action that they displayed that showed they feared God. But here, clearly says there. So, I don't know if this is supposed to be a connecting passage to So, now let's argue against myself for a second, right? A lot of times, as we have seen before, there are parallel passages within the text, right, that sometimes bring light to other passages from before. So, like yesterday, we saw the deal with a father immediately after a catastrophic event of judgment become drunk, and then we see the origins of current enemies of Israel. And we said how that might shed some light on what happened with Noah, who, after a catastrophic event, gets drunk. And then there's something said about a current enemy of Israel, right? And so, because there was sexual immorality in the story of Lot and his daughters, maybe that means that there was sexual immorality with Ham and his mother, right? So we're using those parallel stories, right, that had similar features to see if they, one story kind of helped us to understand what was actually happening and the ambiguity of the other story. Well, you have something like this here, right? There is the questioning of faith. There's the questioning of the fear of God in both stories, right? With one, it is Abraham questioning the faith of Abimelech. Okay. And then when Abimelech is put to the test, he does not act against God, rather does as God has asked him to. All right. Here, God puts Abraham to the test, unsure of his faith. He does as God asked him to. And then that now authenticates his faith, that he does fear God. So does that not do the same thing for Abimelech? His doing as God says, as God has told him. Does that now authenticate his faith and say that he fears God? So there you go. Maybe not. All right. While Abraham's faith was earlier the means by which God counted him as righteous, chapter 15, verse 6, that faith is now active along with his works, and the faith is completed by his works, James chapter 2, verse 21 and 23, so that his faith resulted in obedience, which is its expected outcome. On God's knowledge, see note on Genesis chapter 18, verse 21. I think that's when they're talking about him coming down to see, to investigate the charges of wickedness against Sodom and Gomorrah. But that, it's not like God had to see to come and find out, right? But that he already knows, right? So here still, let me read the note. So we get a refresher. Actually, I like the way that they say it better than what I was about to do to screw up to screw up the actual language there. So let me utilize the language of the biblical scholars. The note on chapter 18, verse 21, it's not on the screen. I'm just going to read it here from my copy. I will go down to see. These words reveal that the decision to destroy the cities of the plain was undertaken with careful scrutiny of the evidence. This remark should not be interpreted as indicating limited knowledge on the part of God, any more than do the similar and ironic words in 11:5. All that is implied is God's direct attention to the matter, right? So something similar here. So it's not that he does not know, but now there is a revealing, right? So there was a clear revealing to all parties involved of the wickedness of Sodom. Here is a clear revealing of all parties involved of Abraham's obedience, which is an indication of his fear of God, right? In the New Testament, John the Baptist has the phrase bear fruit in keeping with repentance, right? And the reason why I know that is I'm always saying that to my daughter, who, she'll do something, we'll get on her. She'll say, I'm sorry. And we're like, man, don't say it if you don't mean it. But I really mean it. I really mean it this time. And this she goes and does the thing again, right? So it's like, hey, if you're really sorry, you would show that you are sorry, right? If you really feel the Lord, you will show that you feel the Lord, right? You will bear fruit in keeping with repentance. You will bear fruit in keeping with the faith. All right. Chapter 22, verse 13. Behind him was a ram. Although Abraham has passed the test, God provides a ram so that it may be sacrificed as a burnt offering. Let me see something real quick. So he says God will provide for himself the lamb. And behold, behind him was a ram. So I wonder if there's a significance between there being a ram versus a lamb, right? Because Isaac asks, where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham says God will provide for himself the lamb, but the text says that behind him was a ram. I wonder if there's a difference in quality. Here, I wonder if there's a difference in quality between the two animals in the minds of those reading the story and those creating the story. All right, in Genesis, such sacrifices are associated with solemn promises, or burnt. God provides a ram so that it may be sacrificed as a burnt offering. In Genesis, such sacrifices are associated with solemn promises made by God. See chapter 8, verses 20 to 22. Instead of his son, the fact that a ram died in the place of Isaac has led many Christian interpreters to introduce here the principle of substitutionary atonement, which would later become a reality in the substitutionary sacrifice death of Christ on the cross as the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. John chapter 1, verse 29. Maybe that could be the case too, right? So they both expect a lamb, but now something else takes the place of the lamb, of the expected sacrifice, I guess. Maybe that could be it. I'm not sure. Chapter 22, verse 14. Echoing Abraham's earlier comment to Isaac, verse 8, the location is named, the Lord will provide. On the basis of this, the belief developed, as it is said to this day, that God would provide the sacrifice necessary to atone for sin, the mount of the Lord. This probably denotes the hill on which the temple was later built in Jerusalem. See Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3. Isaiah 2. So come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Okay, chapter 22, verse 14. No, sorry, I did that. Chapter 22, verse 15 to 18. The divine oath recorded in these verses should not be overlooked, for it brings to a climax a process that started with the conditional promises made by God to Abraham in chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. By myself I have sworn. The fact that God swears by himself gives to these words a unique authority, assuring Abraham that they will indeed be fulfilled. See Hebrews chapter 6, verse 13 and 18. The oath falls into two parts. Whereas the first half focuses on Abraham's many descendants, the second part concentrates on a single descendant who will overcome his enemies, Genesis chapter 22, verse 17, and mediate blessings to all the nations of the earth, verse 18. Although the second half of the oath is often taken to refer to all of Abraham's descendants, Genesis as a whole is interested in tracing a single unique line of offspring that will eventually bring forth a special king who will rule over the Gentiles. It's the introduction to the history of the salvation summary. And the reference to his enemies points in the direction, see note on 3:15, points in this direction. This is why Paul in Galatians 3, verse 16, can insist on one offspring who is Christ, that is the Messiah, cross-reference Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, chapter 24, verse 60, for offspring as a particular descendant. Sorry. And this explains why Isaac is clearly set apart from Ishmael as Abraham's heir. From the perspective of the whole Bible, this oath to Abraham comes to fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Acts chapter 3, verse 25 to 26, and Galatians chapter 3, verse 16. Chapter 22, verses 16 to 17. Because you have not withheld your son, your only son. The central focus of God's words to Abraham is on the way in which Abraham's actions are a vindication of his faith. See the relevant verses. Many also see an allusion in Romans chapter 8, verse 32 to this verse. We'll keep it going. We'll keep it going here. Chapter 22, verse 20 to 24, Nahor's children. Genealogies often demarcate major sections of material in Genesis. These verses, which function like a minor genealogy, divide the main part of the Abraham story, chapters 12 to 22, from several episodes that serve as an apex to the life of Abraham. The death and burial of Sarah, chapter 23. The acquisition of a wife for Isaac, chapter 24. And the death of Abraham, chapter 25, verses 1 to 11. The special reference to Rebekah in chapter 22, verse 23, anticipates the events of chapter 24, when Abraham sends a servant to Padan Aram to find a bride for Isaac from among his relatives. Concubine, chapter 22, verse 24. See note on 25, 5 to 6. We'll see that tomorrow. Chapter 23, verse 1 to 20. The death of Sarah. Before we get there, let me see something real quick. right here. Okay. Now, after these things, it was told to Abraham, behold, Milcah, right, which is the wife of his brother, which we went back and read at the end of chapter 11, also bore children to your brother Nahor. Oh, sorry. There you go. Uz, his firstborn, Buzz, his Uz and Buzz, Uz, his firstborn, Buzz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Hosah, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel fathered Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Moreover, his concubine, whose name was Reumah, bore Teba, Gaham, Tehash, and Maacah. I'm trying to figure out why the concubine, but okay. I guess we'll see that tomorrow. Chapter 23, verse 1 to 20, the death and burial of Sarah. As the story of Abraham's life draws to a conclusion, this chapter records how Abraham buys a cave in Hebron to be a burial place for Sarah. By acquiring this plot of land, Abraham not only establishes future rights to it for his family, but puts down a marker that his own descendants are to be associated with the land of Canaan, as God had already promised. All right. So we're starting to see even greater faith, right? A growth of faith. Hey, God promised them this land, so I'm laying down roots, right? I haven't built a house for myself, but I am buying a permanent burial place for my wife here at this place. Chapter 23, verse 2, Kirioth Arba, which means town of 4. See Joshua chapter 15, verse 14. We'll see that when we get there. Was later known as Hebron. See Judges chapter 1, verses 10 to 20. Chapter 23, verse 3, Hittites. The designation Hittite was used in the ancient Near East to refer to at least 3 different groups of people. Those mentioned in Genesis are probably to be distinguished from the Hittites associated with Anatolia and Syria. Presumably, Abraham addressed the leader of the Hittites who were assembled at the gate of Hebron. The city gate, was commonly the location where public decisions were formally made and transactions between individuals were ratified. Chapter 23, verse 4. A sojourner and foreigner among you. Abraham's description of himself emphasizes his immigrant status. Even after 62 years of semi-nomadic existence in Canaan, Abraham has no permanent location to call his own. This is all the more noteworthy in light of God's repeated promises to Abraham that his descendants will possess all the land of Canaan. The author of Hebrews develops the idea that Abraham chose to go on living in tents. We read that yesterday, because he was looking for a city whose designer and builder was God. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 9 to 10. Chapter 23, verse 6. In contrast to Abraham's own assessment of his status, the Hittites recognized his special relationship with God and accorded him the title of Prince of God. Abraham was probably well known to the inhabitants of Hebron, for he had a long association with this location. See chapter 13, verse 18. Out of deep respect for Abraham, they generously offer him the use of one of the choicest of their own tombs, for the burial of Sarah. Chapter 23, verses 8 to 10. Acknowledging their generosity, Abraham politely asked the Hittites to permit Ephron, the son of Zohar, verse 8, to sell to him at full value the cave of Machpelah, verse 9, as a burial place, although Ephron is present when these discussions take place at the city gate. Verse 10, Abraham first seeks permission from the Hittite population as a whole. This may have been necessary either because Abraham himself was not a Hittite or because the transfer of property from one individual to another required the involvement of a third party, according to tradition. The cave of Machpelah is located beneath the present Mosque of Abraham in Hebron. Chapter 23, verses 11 to 16. Although Hebron's initial response is to offer the field and cave to Abraham for free, this may not have been his true intention, because the second time he offers it, he also casually injects what he would consider a fair price. Verse 15. Abraham insists that he will pay the full value of the property. It is important that Abraham buy the property because an actual sale ensures that Abraham has full legal title to the burial plot. When Ephron sets the price at 400 shekels of silver, verse 15, Abraham willingly accepts and weighs out the amount. Since the weight of a shekel could vary, see the comment according to the weights current among the merchants, verse 16. It is impossible to be certain about the precise value of the field and cave. It is often suggested on the basis of comparison with 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 24, and Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 9, that this was a high price to pay, but one cannot be sure. This type of purchase contract for the cave of Machpelah was quite similar to legal texts from the period found among the Babylonians and the Anatolian Hittites. All right, so you have archaeology that's authenticating the story again. Chapter 23, verse 17 to 19, memory. See note on chapter 13, verse 18. What is significant here? Abraham relocates to near Hebron. Let's see what they're referring to here. Sorry. Let me see. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, filled with the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area were made over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites before all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Okay. Okay, so the note on chapter 13, verse 18, Abraham relocates near Hebron, also known as Kiriath Arba, the town of four. Okay. Machpelah, east of Mamre. I don't see anything. I don't see anything on the map that says Machpelah. But you have Mamre here. Okay. Setting up his tent by the oaks of Mamre. Since one of Abram's allies is Mamre the Amorite. Hebron was for its day a major settlement in the Judean hills. It covered between 6 to 7 acres, was heavily fortified, and contained some large public buildings. A cuneiform tablet discovered here from this time period indicates that Hebron was a capital city of a Canaanite kingdom. Okay, so it's saying that this was the happening spot. Chapter 23, verse 20, Abraham's purchase of the field and cave meant that his descendants would own this land in perpetuity. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rebekah, and Leah would later be laid to rest in this cave. Here we go. All right. Now we'll get into the verses on the history of salvation in the Old Testament. All right, so we read verses 20 to 23, or chapters 20 to 23. So we have a few verses here. Even though Abraham, chapter 20, verse 6, even though Abraham misuses her, God in mercy preserves Sarah, who embodies the line of holy offspring leading to Christ. Chapter 21, verse 2, the miraculous birth of Isaac. The special offspring of promise prefigures the coming birth of Christ in accordance with all the promises of God. Chapter 21, verse 4. Circumcision represents purification and holiness, anticipating the purity of Christ. See the relevant verses. Chapter 21, verse 10. The distinction between the miraculous son of promise and the son of human planning prefigures the distinction between the church and the natural descendants of Abraham. Galatians chapter 4, verse 30. Chapter 22, verse 3. Abraham demonstrates the reality of his faith in action, serving as a model for how our good works demonstrate our faith. See James chapter 2, verses 18 and 24. Chapter 22, verse 8. Isaac comes near to being sacrificed, but God provides a substitute. Ultimately, God will sacrifice his only son who dies in our place. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13 and 16. The ram prefigures the sacrifice of Christ. Chapter 22, verse 16. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son leads to great blessing to his offspring. God's sacrifice of his only son leads to even greater blessings to Christ's spiritual offspring. Romans chapter 5, verses 8 to 11. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 13 to 14. Chapter 23, verse 19. Abraham takes care about Sarah's burial, expressing thereby his faith in God's promise that he will possess the land. The fact that the land is not theirs during Sarah's or Abraham's earthly life points forward to the resurrection of the dead. Abraham takes care about Sarah's burial, expressing thereby his faith in God's promise that he will possess the land. The fact that the land is not theirs. Okay. I was late. I was reading there, 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 but theirs, possession, THEIRS, theirs. The fact that the land was not theirs during Sarah's or Abraham's earthly life points forward to the resurrection of the dead. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 13 to 16. All righty. Thank you all for staying with me this whole time. I hope that it's blessed you. That you're able to get some good information here, have a greater understanding of the story, and see how it is relevant to your life, your faith. I pray that you will have opportunity to demonstrate your faith in the Lord coming up here soon. Pray this in your son, in his son, Jesus' name. Amen.